All right, man, peace. So, brothers, if you've ever read any Greek tragedies in junior high school or high school, whether they be written by Aeschylus or Sophocles or whoever, the great and fatal flaw of a Greek tragedy hero is always hubris, meaning arrogance, overconfidence, cockiness, etc. It causes you to misappraise yourself, and it always leads to your eventual downfall. And that's what we've seen with Carmelo Anthony. I made a bevy of videos pertaining to Carmelo Anthony over the past 2 years and change. And his fans always respond with some level of vitriol. They have very poor understanding of who Carmelo Anthony actually is. He was never a superstar. He was never a great player. At his very best, he was an elite scorer. But he was never a great player because he never made anyone better. And the fact of the matter is that over the course of Carmelo's career, the best seasons that his teams ever had was when he had an elite level point guard commandeering the offense and marginalizing him as what he actually is, which is just a souped up version of James Worthy when it comes to his green light. James Worthy is actually a better player than Carmelo Anthony ever was, but he never had the green light that Carmelo has. Carmelo Anthony on a championship team would play the James Worthy role, or would have played the James Worthy role. He's a third-tier star on a championship team. He's not even the second option. He's the third option because he does not make good enough decisions to be a second option on a championship-level team. If we look at the history of the NBA and we look at the all-time great second options, the second option player normally has to have a very high basketball IQ, whether it's Scottie Pippen or Kevin McHale, Joe Dumars, Manu Ginobili, whoever. And Carmelo never had that. He needed to be a third option on a championship level team. And that's why he made the biggest mistake of his life, turning down LeBron James and Dwayne Wade's offer, because he would have fit in perfectly on that Miami Heat team. But just to get back to the point, his former teammate, the great point guard of the 2000s, Chauncey Billups, who in my view was the best overall point guard of the 2000s because of what he brought to the table from an intangibles perspective. No, he didn't put up the stats of a Steve Nash. But when it comes to intangibles and that winning ability, Chauncey Billups was right there with anyone. He was right up there with the best point guards of the 2000s, and he should be in the Hall of Fame. But Chauncey's going to drop dime on Carmelo because when Chauncey was on the Denver Nuggets in 2009, that's when Denver had their best season. Because once again, Carmelo was not given too many responsibilities offensively. Chauncey Billups is going to tell us what has held Carmelo Anthony back from ascending to the highest level of who he could possibly have been in the NBA, and why no team wants him right now. So, of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
All right, hey, check this out. Chauncey Billups had an interesting theory on why...
You got a name right. Go ahead. Big Shot. Just call him Big Shot.
Thank you. Chauncey Big Shot Billups, all right? Had an interesting theory on to why his former teammate Carmelo Anthony is no longer in the NBA. Take a listen.
I love it. Now, the only thing I will say, and I've even told Melo this, scoring 30 meant too much to Melo.
The reason why scoring 30 meant too much to Melo is because he was given way too much leeway from the early portion of his NBA career. The worst thing that happened to Melo was that he was not drafted by the Detroit Pistons. I believe that that's the worst thing that happened to him, and it's also the worst thing that happened to the Detroit Pistons. Because had they drafted Melo and had a team of Chauncey Billups, Tayshaun Prince, Richard Hamilton, Ben Wallace, Rasheed Wallace, and Melo, with Larry Brown as the head coach, that team may have won 3, maybe even 4 championships. They should have won back-to-back. They would have won in 2005 if Weedhead Rasheed had picked up his defensive assignment. But I thought that the Detroit Pistons drafting the wrong person hurt both their franchise as well as Carmelo, because I think that he would have been on a championship team. Well, he certainly would have been on a championship team in 2004 had he been drafted by them. But I think they may have been a dynasty had they been able to have that offensive punch from a Carmelo Anthony. And he was never properly schooled on how to manipulate an NBA game, which is what great players can always do. That's how you know that Carmelo was never, ever a great player or a superstar. Superstars are able to maximize their team's offensive possessions.
It meant too much because he can have games where he had 20, 22, we win the game and he's mad. he might have 36, and he's in there, we lose the game, and he's in there picking everybody up.
Right, because that's why he was out there in the first place, just to get his numbers. Once again, that early 2000s era in the NBA was very harmful, and they were very fortunate to be able to move past that era of me basketball, hero ball that had been inspired by Michael Jordan. The difference is that those players in that era, the Tracy McGrady's, the Vince Carter's, the Allen Iversons, the Paul Pierce's, so on and so forth, they did not have the understanding of the game that Michael Jordan had. They also were not as proficient in the triangle offense as Michael Jordan was. So they were having games where they shot 11 for 27, and the coach was allowing it because everyone was trying to copy what the Chicago Bulls were doing in the late 90s, and it wasn't working. Carmelo Anthony was one of those players who was just in the me ball era, just jacking up shots, trying to get his 30 points, and the Denver Nuggets would win their 46 to 48 games, and no one would say anything because everyone was trying to find the next Jordan, and it was hampering his development. And he had the wrong mindset, and he carried it through the end of his career. And you can't think of one thing that Carmelo did well other than score.
The reason why he's not in the league, because he's still worthy, is he hasn't mentally taken that step back to say, okay, I'll come in and play against backups. I'll try to help the team out. I know I might not be able to close, but I just want to help.
Well, brother, no disrespect to you, Chauncey Billups, but no, Carmelo Anthony is not worthy of being in the NBA anymore because he can't do anything other than score, and he cannot even do that anymore. He can't defend. He's not a good rebounder. He does not have good bounce. He's not a good passer. So he's out of the league.
I love it. I love it. Nobody respects Chauncey more than me. And when he speaks, 9 out of 10 times, it's the real talk. I played with players like that was more worried about their stats than winning. And 9 out of 10 times, those be the guys that don't end up on winning teams. That'll be the guys that don't get contracts, and that'll be guys that finish their careers with no championship because they're more worried about their stats and their individual games than team games. There's a lot of guys like that. And we hear that from Chauncey about Melo. Melo doesn't have a championship. So 9 out of 10 times with guys think like that, that'd be the guys that fall in that category. Hey, look.
Right, but Carmelo Anthony, he was never a championship caliber player. And there are only about 3 or 4 championship caliber players per generation, unless you have a group of very good players who come together and combine to form a championship nucleus, i.e. KG, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, who were very good players, bordering on great, but they were not transcendent. In that generation, the transcendent players were Shaq, Kobe, and Tim Duncan. And then later on, you had LeBron. KG, Ray Allen, Paul Pierce were very good to borderline great players, but they were a cut beneath that. Carmelo was a cut beneath LeBron. And the difference is that he did not have the humility to understand that like Chris Bosh had.
Be transparent. I thought like that. I played like that. But I didn't play a dynamic sport like where you playing basketball, everyone's going two-way. Everything like Melo. Oh, hell yeah.
Right, but Marcellus Wiley, you were a defensive lineman. You were a defensive end in football. So you could afford to play greedy unless it was your job to run a stunt and occupy the guard and the center, to help stop the run or to execute some type of intricate pass rushing scheme. It was okay for you to be selfish. Carmelo Anthony has to go out there and make his teammates better if he's a superstar. That was his job, and he fell woefully short.
Because you're playing one way, though. I got to get my sacks. You know why? Because it's no I in team, but there's a me. And if I don't get my numbers, I'm not going to be on this team. I'm not going to get my money. So the reality is I try to add it up. I'm going to do my best. You do your best. We play Voltron. So I think it gets the negative connotation when you're like, I'm giving buckets. End of the game, all the story goes away. You look at the scoreboard. How many points up there? Carmelo was in the mindset, if I give you 30, where your 20? Where your 20? Oh.
And that's why he never won shit, Marcellus Wiley. No disrespect, brother, but the only position in football that you can compare to an NBA superstar is quarterback. We look at a great quarterback and we say he's transcendent when he can make everyone around him better, i.e. a Tom Brady, i.e. a Peyton Manning, i.e. an Aaron Rodgers, when everything is clicking with him. We also have quarterbacks in the NFL who just put up gaudy stats, like a Phillip Rivers, and they never win shit. That's who Carmelo Anthony is. And Carmelo's numbers are not even really that gaudy. He's a low level, really 2 levels beneath a Kevin Durant at his best. At Carmelo's best, he's about 2 levels below what Kevin Durant is at his best.
But it's on me. So I understand when guys say, look, I individually go after. What was he supposed to? Yeah, but that follows.
What he was supposed to do is make his teammates better. If you call him a superstar, then his job is to make his team and his teammates better. It's okay if he can't do that, but then just stop calling him a superstar. In the 80s, the superstars were Magic, Larry, and Isaiah. And you also had Dr. J, who was on the tail end of his career. Moses Malone was kind of superstar-ish, even though he was more of a supplementary player. He was a secondary player. He was a secondary superstar to Dr. J, who really created the culture on that team. And in the late 80s, you had Isaiah Thomas. Those were the real superstars of the NBA for those 10 years. And if you want to say on the Lakers, if you want to put Kareem in there, even though Kareem was on the tail end of his career as well, those are superstars. Those players are going to make their teammates much, much better. And they're going to maximize offensive possessions, and they're going to do their best on defense. Melo never did that because all those things involve sacrifice. If you're not willing to sacrifice, you're not going to be a good leader on an NBA team. You're not going to be a real superstar, and you're not going to win championships.
It was like, man, I had 200 yards. Yeah, but you fumbled 3 times too. That didn't hurt the game. You know what I'm saying? That's the same thing. On the game winning drive. Same thing, right. On the game winning drive. 9 touchdowns, but I had 200. 2 million left in there. No championships either.
At least you know that, Marcellus Wiley. There's a reason why. There's a reason why you went on a championship team. It is what it is. That's why you're an advocate for Carmelo, because the both of you think alike. But I just saw this segment. I found it very interesting what Chauncey Billups stated. And it's almost like you having a friend who you know has a fatal flaw, and eventually is going to catch up with him. Carmelo's very short-sighted. He's a very short-sighted dude who's more entranced by pop culture and being woke and chasing around these thotties than having the commitment that it took to be a champion. So hopefully now that Chauncey has said what he said, a lot of you Carmelo Anthony fanboys will understand what the truth is. So peace.